Gaza receives largest aid shipment. Biden says Mideast leaders must consider a two-state solution after the war ends. Israeli media become communicators of Israel's message. All of this today, Monday, October 30th, 2023, on the Dunkley Report. Nearly 36 trucks entered Gaza in the largest aid convoy since the war between Israel and Hamas began. But humanitarian workers say the assistance still falls desperately short of needs after thousands of people broke into warehouses seeking food. Meanwhile, the Gaza Health Ministry says the death toll among Palestinians passed 8,000 as Israeli tanks and infantry pursue what Israel calls a second stage in the war ignited by Hamas's brutal Oct. 7. Incursion. The toll is without precedent in decades of Israeli-Palestinian violence. Over 1,400 people have died on the Israeli side, mainly civilians killed during the initial attack. As the Israel-Hamas war enters a new phase, President Joe Biden is pressing Israeli and Arab leaders to think hard about their eventual post-war reality. Biden says central to that future should be achieving the long-sought two-state solution where Israel coexists with an independent Palestinian state. The push for a two-state solution has been put on the back burner since the last American-led effort at peace talks collapsed in 2014. Biden himself said last year that the ground is not ripe for such talks. But Biden is now warning that the Middle East can't go back to the pre-war status quo. Israeli media have espoused a dual role following Hamas's devastating attack on southern Israeli communities and the war that it set off. Beyond their traditional function as journalists, they are also in many cases acting as public advocators on behalf of the Israeli war effort. Banners fly across the screens and sites of mainstream media outlets, declaring, "We will win." Newscasters decry Hamas's atrocities as the act of Nazis. An Israeli news portal has set up a campaign where users can share English videos disseminating the Israeli message of Hamas barbarism. The shift shows how deeply the Hamas attack affected Israeli society. The Israeli military has intensified airstrikes in Gaza, including near its largest hospital. Thousands of people broke into aid warehouses in the besieged enclave, desperate for food and basic items. Internet and phone connectivity were restored for many people on Sunday after Israeli strikes had knocked out most communications in the territory late Friday. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced a second stage in the 3-week-old war. He says Israel is determined to bring back 239 hostages taken by Hamas during its bloody Oct. 7. Rampage. The Health Ministry in Gaza says the Palestinian death toll passed 8,000. More than 1,400 were slain in Hamas's attack on Israel. Police in southern India have detained a man for his alleged involvement in setting off explosives that killed at least 3 people and wounded 50 more at a Jehovah's Witness gathering. Hundreds of faithful were at a prayer session Sunday at the Zamra International Convention Center in the town of Kalamassery in Kerala State when the explosion took place. The state's top police officer says an initial investigation has revealed an improvised explosive device was used. Jehovah's Witnesses identify as Christians, but are guided by distinctive beliefs and practices. They are known for their door-to-door proselytism. Mexican authorities have raised the toll to 48 dead from Hurricane Otis, days after the fierce Category 5 storm struck the country's southern Pacific coast and the tourist city of Acapulco. Mexico's Civil Defense Agency said Sunday that 43 of the dead were found in Acapulco and 5 in a nearby community. A local governor had earlier in the day raised the number of missing to 36 from 10 a day earlier. Otis roared ashore early Wednesday with devastating 165 mph winds after strengthening rapidly. Families on Sunday were burying the dead and still searching for essentials as soldiers and volunteers cleared debris-filled streets. Russian President Vladimir Putin has sought to deflect blame from the Kremlin for a riot in the southern region of Dagestan that targeted a flight from Israel, charging without evidence that Ukrainian agents of Western spy agencies were behind the rampage. A mob stormed the airport Sunday after a flight from Israel landed there, and clashes with police left 20 people injured. Putin on Monday cast the violence as part of U.S. efforts to weaken Russia. Hundreds of angry men, some carrying banners with anti-Semitic slogans, rushed onto the tarmac of the airport in Makhachkala, the capital of the predominantly Muslim region, looking for Israeli passengers on the flight from Tel Aviv. Turkey has marked the 100th anniversary of the creation of the modern, secular republic from the ruins of the Ottoman Empire. With little pageantry and no gala reception to commemorate the important milestone, President Recep Tayyip Erdogan's government has opted for a low-key celebration which comes months after a devastating earthquake killed 50,000 people and coincides with the Israeli-Hamas war. The subdued affair, however, has dismayed many in Turkey, who believe Erdogan's government is trying to undermine the legacy of the republic's founding father, Mustafa Kemal Atatürk. In his speech, Erdogan highlighted his government's achievements in the past 20 years, but also expressed gratitude to Atatürk and others who helped create the republic. Around 2,000 Ukrainians have taken part in a 1-kilometer race in Kiev, wearing bibs displaying the name of a person instead of a number. Each runner chose one person to whom they dedicated the run. Spouses, children, friends, siblings, neighbors, and colleagues ran for someone they knew who either was killed, taken captive, or injured during Russia's ongoing war in Ukraine. The organizers of Sunday's event called it the world's longest marathon because no race has lasted as long as Ukraine has been fighting for its freedom. Russians commemorated the victims of Soviet state terror on Sunday, while the Russian government continues its crackdown on dissent in the country. The Returning of the Names event was organized by the Nobel Peace Prize-winning human rights group Memorial. It has traditionally been held in Moscow on Octo. 29. The eve of Russia's Remembrance Day for the victims of political repression. As the demonstration was not approved by authorities for the 4th year running, Muscovites and several Western ambassadors instead laid flowers at a monument. Memorial also organized a live broadcast of the reading of the victims' names from Moscow, other Russian cities, and abroad. Today's news was reported by the Associated Press. This has been the international news for Monday, October 30th, 2023. Thanks again for joining us here at the Dunkley report.